Hey, you guys. This is not going to be your regular, fun, silly acting Monique Live. This is not what that is today because we are going to have a conversation and impactful discussion on something that is very prevalent in the U.S. and something that's also affected the lives of many women here domestically and also globally, and that is human sex trafficking. So January, if you guys don't know, is National Slavery Human Sex Trafficking Prevention Month. And we're going to have a conversation about that because we all need to be educated. We all need to be aware. I am a woman. I have friends that are women. I have daughters. We're all women here, and we need to bring awareness to this issue that has affected so many women. And one of my guests, her name is Ferrazzi. She is a humanitarian, she's an entrepreneur, and she's also a model. And she's going to talk to us today. She'll be calling in to talk to us about human sex trafficking. So I hope you guys are tuned in. And if you have young daughters, please tell them to tune in to this live. If you have friends, if you have family members, just share this live with them because, like I said, this is going to be a serious conversation because we want to bring awareness because this is National Human Sex Trafficking Awareness Prevention Month. And so we just want to talk about ways that you can protect yourself and ways that you can prevent this. We have someone on here that's 11 years old. So yes, you definitely need to watch this. Share it with your friends, share it with your family members, because it's going to be some great info today. So I'm just going to read Ferrazzi's bio. So give me a second to pull it up, you guys. So Ferrazzi, she moves easily from the United Nations ambassador to top model to humanitarian, musician, and educator. She started in fashion shows, ad campaigns, and magazines as a muse to the world's top designers, including Versace, Chanel, Louis Vuitton, Ferragamo, and many others. Ferrazzi was raised in New York City by philanthropic-minded parents. Farah has exhibited a sense of civic duty and global awareness from an early age. Her passion for helping women led her to volunteer in the shelter system in some of the most underserved areas. Because of her important work involving gender equality among young women and girls, Farah received the Distinguished International Humanitarian Leadership Award from the National Council of Women of the United States. She was also named as a United Nations ambassador by the late President Mary E. Singletary. Farah thrives at the epicenter of social justice, working to integrate her passion and style and beauty with her innate desire to help others. Having studied biochemistry in college and inspired by the domestic violence survivors who were unable to use conventional products because of facial trauma, Farah first created a range of all-natural lip balms, and she has evolved into a perfumista. That's a new one. I haven't heard that one. But she has a fragrance line called Farah, and it is created in partnership with Scent Marketing Inc., the premier scent branding firm, and world-renowned IFF senior perfumer Laurence D. Gournet, and is scheduled for release late spring of 2020. Or it released already. I'm sorry. I'm reading this. A portion of the proceeds will benefit human trafficking survivors. So Farah is doing some amazing things in her philanthropic efforts of helping this cause that, needs to be highlighted. She's doing some amazing work with volunteering and helping women across the world with sex trafficking. So Farah, are you here? I want to bring you on. Is she? Yeah, she's here.
Hi, how
Hi.
are you?
I'm good. How are you?
So wonderful to be with you today. We're all kind of our own little production production houses here during quarantine, so I'm gonna try to not cut my head off. But thank you so much for having me. It's such a privilege and an honor to be here, and thank you so much for all that you do to bring awareness to this really, really crucial topic. And before we start, I just wanted to say I got a huge box of your products this morning, and I actually, okay, so this is all my real hair. Like, I end up sitting.
It's beautiful.
Thank you. Well, I'm Pakistani, Persian, and Afghan, so like we're kind of hairy people. So my grandma had like super long hair, and I emulated her. It's like a cultural thing. And the rice water, can I just say, thank you so much. I actually have it here so everybody knows I used it. I did. And with straight hair, it's like you see split ends right away. And, you know, we're doing our own hair and makeup. We can't call a glam team. So I appreciated it very much. And you didn't pay me to say that because I just got this box like 6
I did not.
So thank you. It's a wonderful product, and the fact that you're a socially conscious company that understands how to use your platform and engage your customers to help their dollars motivate something important and impactful. I truly salute you. So thank you so much.
No, thank you. Listen, I salute you for doing some of the amazing things that you're doing to bring awareness and to also help women. Like, you have a passion for this. So can I ask you, like, how did you develop the passion, or what experience did you go through to even know that this even existed? Because I feel like I said earlier, this is an issue that we as a country just try to sweep under the rug. There's not a lot of awareness that's brought to this issue. So what sparked your interest and your passion to help women that were dealing with this?
Well, it actually came about in a few different ways. Being from the ethnic and cultural background that I'm from, bias against vulnerable groups, minorities, and women is something that is very apparent in the Middle East, sure, in my countries of ancestry in South Asia and the Middle East. And we get all of that bad rap in Islamic nations. We're the first ones that, you know, the media sometimes paints as oppressive towards women. But the truth of the matter is and again, just before I continue, because I wanted to make it abundantly clear, as you have, that human trafficking and abuse doesn't just affect women, but it tends to, like any form of abuse, affect and target the most vulnerable of any society. And unfortunately, women tend to encompass that across the board, no matter which society you examine. So my countries of ancestry were no different. And my grandmother, who she actually passed away, unfortunately, in 2018 of a brain tumor. But no, that's fine. She was a huge inspiration for me. She was a refugee. And she was, do you remember the National Geographic cover of the Afghan girl with the crazy eyes? That was like my grandma. She was one of those people from that area. And they they're very special looking. And what ended up happening was she grew up in an area that was very Taliban controlled, close to the border of Pakistan and Afghanistan. And she was fine. The Taliban didn't really bother her until her father passed away when she was around 9. And unfortunately, that's when it becomes real. When you take away that shield of privilege, whether it's a male relative, whether it's money and economic stability, whatever it is that causes that vulnerability, that's when there's this element that seems to come in and start to try to exploit that. And so the Whispers, she grew up in a little village, and she had blue eyes. She looked just like me, but her eyes were blue. And I used to tease her. I used to say, you know, she used to love my modeling while she was alive. And I would be like, yeah, I would be like 10 times more famous in this like European standard of beauty industry. If I had those, grandma, and she would just laugh and she'd say, no, brown is beautiful. Your eyes are brown like my son.
It is. Yes,
But
it is.
yes, but female, she stood out, not just being female, but she was a very special looking child, like many women of color from different cultures. We're fetishized, we're exoticized, even in the modeling industry, even in the media. So we're aware of that element. And basically the whispers got around in her village that there was no man in that house. It was just the lady and her very pretty daughter. And human trafficking, they go in villages like that in places like Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, and just like they take the hair and sell it for wigs and weaves and things like that. They traffic them for all sorts of things, for sex, for organs, and it's so heartbreaking. So they were coming for my grandma any day, but my great grandma wasn't having that. And so she made a plan in the middle of the night. They had to fake their own death and run away. And she ran away to Pakistan. And they had to change their names, and everything. So I had that history in me. My grandma wasn't allowed to read. They didn't believe in educating women in that society until she came. First of all, she was married. She ended up marrying my grandfather, who was a very educated man, and he believed in educating women. But again, it shouldn't take a male figure in your life to advocate for women's rights. It should be inherent, right, that we have the right to be successful and educate ourselves. So she was supported in her education after marriage, and she came to America and taught herself English for the citizenship exam. But she used to always tell me that story about how they didn't let her read. Whenever I didn't want to go to school or I was being kind of lazy about it, she'd say, if I had the opportunity for a free K-12 any K-12 education, any education at all, she's like, I would have been the president of the. And she was so smart. She could have been so many things, although she did so much with her life. So I had that cultural aspect. And then the interesting thing was, for the majority of my life, I wouldn't say majority, I would say for most of my life until adolescence, I thought it was just a culture thing. Like teenagers, we think, that's something that happens to Afghan people or Pakistani people. And, you almost don't know whether to be real about it and forthcoming about it, because, again, the media already paints us as terrorists, as thugs, as violent and criminals. And then when you want to be honest about what happens in your communities, sometimes also there's this element of the white savior. You get painted again as, barbaric or backwards, and you don't want to represent your people that way. So I sort of, I struggled with it a bit, but I thought maybe this is something that's very cultural. And then I got to high school in New York, and things started to get interesting. When we speak about human trafficking, and again, I just wanted to say I was so impressed by the fact sheet that you came up with before this live, because one of the points that you meant to really drive home was that it happens in plain sight. People think that human trafficking, it's like guys in a white van that kidnap you, or it's like Liam Neeson's daughter in Taken that gets kidnapped on a girls' trip and human trafficked. And yeah, sure, that can happen, but the majority of the time, people are trafficked by people they're already familiar with, people they already know. They're trafficked by friends, boyfriends. They're recruited by people of both sexes. So things that are normalized to us and we don't realize at the time. And now that I'm educated and know better and worked in this field, I worked in the shelter system, now I can look back and say, oh my God, that could have been human trafficking. And I'll give you an example. So the most important thing is that we define human trafficking. First of all, a lot of people don't really have a clear idea of what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
so human trafficking is it's any means of services or the sale of human beings in part or in whole that's acquired through means of, we like to use the acronyms FFC if you're not sure of a human trafficking situation, because we are sex worker positive when it's a consenting adult situation, when it's not an exploitation situation. We are pro sex worker, but we are not pro exploitation. So it's force, fraud, or coercion, FFC. When you're examining a human trafficking situation, those are good letters to remember. And that can be anything from mental abuse, emotional abuse, and that's where we see a lot of the romantic partners who traffic others. And you see it in same sex as well. It's not just girls. LGBTQ also, we have girls who do it to other females as well. They get them into the situation through means of, again, force, fraud, coercion. They befriend them. So things that started.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. It's very, they're very, very, very clever. Human traffickers are so clever on how to.
So let me ask you.
Sure.
So you dispelled some of the myths. So how can one, or we have a lot of young girls that are watching, like one, she said she was 11 years old.
Yes.
What can she look for, or how can she protect herself from a predator? So let's say if there is a girlfriend that she becomes friends with in high school or grade school, like what are some of the signs that she can look for that this person that she's now friends with is into like the human sex trafficking?
And that is such an excellent question, because it takes all of us to be vigilant. I think of that often, that I wish I knew. I wish I had known then the things that I knew now, so I could have even protected some of my friends from situations where I'm sure they suffered, or they got into something that they didn't have to be in. But yes, signs that someone you know, like your child or one of your friends or even yourself, might be getting involved in a human trafficking situation. They do all sorts of things. I'll give you an example. One of the situations we had that we saw in New York in particular, it was in the Bronx. And I'm just going to be blatantly honest. Human traffickers in the United States in particular, they traffic children of color. And I say children because anyone under the age of 18 who's involved in sex work is considered a victim of human trafficking, even if they think it's consensual. So there's no such thing as an underage prostitute, as an underage stripper. They're children. Just like consent laws are there for a reason. And so it's not to shame them again. It's just no one gets anywhere by accident. And whenever I see a young person like that, I always think, that person deserved better from their surroundings and whoever was around them. And it's just about trying to help them get back to that place where that's, not an option for them, at least as a minor. But so, right. So anyone that solicits you, even for nude photos, a lot of the sexting, a lot of these things have really been normalized. And sure, sexual empowerment. I'm a fan of OnlyFans because I'm somebody who's had to go in and do human trafficking stings in places that, just like modeling, will falsely present themselves as women's empowerment. Oh, like a strip club owners love to tell me that they're getting women a bag, that they're offering employment for them, that they're, giving them a job. And I say, okay, I have to sit and talk to them sometimes. They never want to talk to you, and so they think you're going to raid them. And then they call you back. And then they want to talk to me and be polite. And I say, well, for example, in a doctor's office, my father's a doctor, and he could never hire someone who had a history of substance abuse. Not only is it risky for him, it's just unethical. You're tempting somebody that has already struggled and overcome something. And ethically, you know, that's not helping that person even in their own journey. And when it comes to examining sex, all for, you know, the hot girl that can twerk, that deserves the bag, and, you know, wants to get somewhere. Beauty is a talent, stripping is a talent, sex work is a real job, and it's a hard job. They get injured, they get STDs, they don't have health insurance. When you examine them and you screen them for mental health, they don't even, do you think any one of these strip club owners have a counselor backstage screening dancers for mental health, asking them, are you a survivor of childhood sex abuse, which the overwhelming majority are. And causation is not the same thing as correlation, but there's a link. So if you know this is a population that tends to have this occurrence, if you care about your employees, you'll have mental health services for them. You know that they go on the pole and fall and hurt themselves, and you won't throw them away when they're injured or when they're old or when they, you know, don't look the part. Then then you can't be anti-women while saying you're pro-women. And they don't do anything. Most of them get reassaulted once every shift. The high rolling customers get a slap on the wrist, and they get to come back. They get even, some of my friends, a lot of my friends are strippers. They get stalked by the security that's supposed to help them. All of that stuff happens to them. And then when they talk about it, there's this attitude from the general public that, oh, you know what you signed up for. Just like models when they get assaulted, just like actresses when they got assaulted by Harvey Weinstein. It's this apathy. And they always, it's like what Amber Rose said, that, you know, one man will accuse a woman of being a hoe. And what is a hoe? A garden tool? That's not a viable, you know, logical reason to violate somebody. I don't care what if you don't like that person at all. That's just not acceptable. But one man will accuse a woman of being a hoe, and then everyone will say everything that happened to her was deserved. But 50 women will accuse a man of being a predator, and they will still get out the microscope, and, you know, the evidence is there. I go to court for victims, but it's always, it's like what you touched on in the beginning of the segment, that it's very hard to get people to talk about it. So things like when for young people themselves, they should be vigilant. They should be skeptical when older people if you're 12 and someone is 16 or 17 and wants to be friends with you, you should wonder why. You should wonder why. And I know it feels good. You feel special. You feel like the chosen one. You feel cool. But human traffickers and people who I would say have bad intentions, people who exploit, especially children, and there are people who are narcissists, and they target empathetic people who have kind hearts and exhibit compassion. That's a target for some people. And my grandma used to say, you know, the darkness sometimes is attracted to the light. They look for people like that. They sit back and observe. They'll sit somewhere like in a church or in a classroom, or they've even human traffickers have posed as my students and come to some of my college classes that I teach at places like Marist College and Vassar College to learn what we're telling people and to try to act as that or not that. So they will try anything to get your trust and make you think that they're just your friend, and, you know, we're just gonna go to this party. It's even happened to me as a model. I used to tell my friends, like, if somebody invites you on some old man's boat, he's like 68.
Don't go.
His friend. I used to ask my friend, and they will give you every excuse. They'll say, oh, well, you can get an opportunity. You can do business. And these are places like the Cannes Film Festival, Paris Fashion Week. I probably could have talked to somebody who was an executive somewhere, who was a producer, but no business is done after 10 p.m. with alcohol and drugs in a party. If older people and people who are very moneyed and powerful, and this is something we learned back home in places like Pakistan and Afghanistan, where you don't want to mess with that guy. He might have a lot of money, but it's funny money, and he could be a really bad guy. So you have to use common sense as well. Or things like, for
let me tell you
example,
this example.
if someone is very, very young, but things we look at, they tend to have no real clothes. They'll have expensive bags and expensive shoes like that even somebody that young, you wonder how they could get that, like the new Louis Vuitton bag, the new red bottoms, but all of their clothes will be very skimpy. Like they'll have their hair laid, their makeup done, nails done, but it'll all be very sort of sexual. And again, that's not every case, but that'll be the case, more often than not. Also for teens who have their, they're doing summer jobs, they're doing after school work. We've had instances where it's girls who would never come to pick up their own checks. We would train employers who would get a lot of teens during the summer and say, if it's like an older person, that creepy older boyfriend who always seems to be waiting outside of school, they never get money in their hand. They're always like, my man's gonna come pick it up, or I'll have someone else come pick it up. All of those are signs. Things like them seeming tired all the time, because a lot of trafficking situations with sex trafficking, it happens in the hotels, it happens at night, and it varies from community to community. So things like that, things to look out for.
So you said, I'm sitting here just like taking all this in, and it's like, man, you really can't trust anybody. And the thing is, so I was in Miami last weekend, and just hearing everything that you just told me about what to look for, and I honestly think that I saw 2 sex trafficking victims in the hotel, because obviously we stayed in a hotel. They were 2 young girls of color, and they had expensive Gucci bags, skimpy outfits, and they were sitting at the table with a guy who was maybe in his 80s, and they were probably in their teenage years. And I have a picture on my phone. Obviously, I wouldn't show it here, but I took a picture to go home and show my daughter. But it's like, what do you do? Like, is there anything that we can do if we see things like that? Obviously, they look like they were enjoying themselves. So it's like, who am I to like interrupt? Like, well, what are you guys doing? Even though like my husband and I, we were just looking at it and shaking our heads like, what the heck does this old 80-year-old man, what is he doing with these 2 teenage young girls?
Right.
So like, what is there anything that like, if the public sees it, is there anything that we can do, or should we just like mind our own business?
That is such an excellent question. And I just, again, that's so heartwarming to hear. It makes me feel so good that people really notice and care enough. Just, you get that gut feeling, and women's intuition, whatever you want to call it. So thank you for being the type of person who actually, first of all, you have to be the type of person to want to care about others. So thank you again for being aware of that and witnessing that. But yes, it's really hard once you know what to look for, to not want to act, or to kind of feel powerless and say, because again, you're not sure. Sometimes people look younger than they really are. And again, even if they're not under 18, you still don't know if that person needs help, if that person is acting on their own will, if they're under the influence of drugs, if they're being controlled in some way financially. All of that falls under coercion and force. People think that, oh, well, she got something out of it, he took care of her. And no, that's financial abuse. When if you really love someone, you'll take care of them or want to see their well-being anyway, whether it's from your help or whether it's on their own. That's just how it is. So it's not natural to expect it to be, once it becomes transactional. Yes. So the first thing is to take a deep breath take a woosah because you get that, oh my gosh, even listening to your story, like the blood just starts to rush and your heart starts to beat very fast. You have to take a deep breath and just calm yourself, be aware of your surroundings. Do not approach the person or the suspected victim, because traffickers, oh my gosh, they can be some really, really awful people. They're the type of people who abuse others. So if it truly is a trafficking situation, we don't want you to get hurt. I'm from New York, which has really strict gun laws, but people carry anyway. And I've gone undercover and done things in the South, in places like you're from Georgia, right? I've gone.
No, I'm in Chicago.
Oh, you're from Chicago. Yes, that's Dora. Your management. She's from Georgia. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But yes, I've gone to Georgia. I've gone to Chicago. I've gone to places like Houston, Texas. That's #1 for human trafficking, which is a concealed carry state. And even trained, when we're being tagged and followed by like a police officer in an armored vehicle who knows our movements, we still have to be very careful about approaching people. And if you truly are somewhere like a restaurant or a hotel and you suspect a trafficking situation going on, quietly, without drawing attention to yourself, alert the management, because and if they do not act, take a note of all of that. And I urge you to not only contact your local offices, because pressure on politicians is really something that changes policies. And it's something we even saw. A really interesting example is Donald Trump. And again, we're not per se fans of Donald Trump at the UN. He wasn't really fans of us either. However, the Epstein case was a big deal during his administration, and there were even photos of Donald Trump with Jeffrey Epstein. And so it was paramount to his credibility as a politician to distance himself from Jeffrey Epstein and that whole situation, like we saw a lot of people do that were on the flight logs and all of that stuff. So he made it a point to make human trafficking a big deal. At least he paid lip service to it. So it isn't always about, my whole point is, as a UN ambassador, I don't really care what a politician feels from inside, but you can leverage moments in media, things like your next guest, the Cyntoia Brown case. If you see something, anything that speaks to you here, whether you were eating in a restaurant and you saw something that looked like human trafficking, and when you consulted the hotel, they had no best practices in place, they had no sort of protocol or plan of action, you can call up their board of directors of that company and say, hey, you got to be a Karen. Sometimes you can Karen for good things, for human trafficking, and you let them know that this population is educated. We know better. We are your constituents, senator, representative, mayor. We're not going to vote for you if we continue to see human trafficking in our communities. And you let these companies know that if they're not vigilant, especially in high-risk companies like strip clubs, like restaurants and nightclubs and massage parlors and hotels, we know that's where the majority of the activity goes on. Just like we have to police universities about having protocol and best practices for students, female students who report rape and situations like that. So it's really important. Sometimes you have to make people care. And that's what we do at the UN.
Agree.
So yes.
Well, listen, thank you so much. You shared a wealth of information. Like, I can't thank you enough for bringing more awareness to our audience, because like I said, you know, people need to be aware. They need to know what to look for. They need to know that it goes on and it's happening right in our plain vision. So I just want to thank you so much for sharing all of that knowledge, and also thank you for the work that you're doing. I'm sure your grandmother is so proud of you. And thank you for being on our platform and giving us that information. So I put your Instagram where people can find you and follow you. And if they have any further questions,
Yes.
her Instagram is pinned right there at the bottom. So thanks so much.
Sure. And you can always, for your viewers and for you as well, if you're ever unsure of a trafficking situation, please, you can reach out to us at the National Council of Women anytime for any of those situations. Yes. And I personally, one of us, my colleagues or myself, will help steer you in the right direction. So thank you for all that you do. Bless you. Thank you.
Thank you. You too. All right. Have a good one. Take care.
Bye.